Hello, welcome to This is Tech Talks. Today we're talking to CEO and co-founder of Digger, Igor Salutsky. Welcome, Igor.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
Very glad to have you, Igor. And Deep, what would you like to know about Digger?
Yeah, so my first question comes in mind that what is infrastructure as a code? We are creating infrastructure, but now we have a digger. So the question is explain, can you explain the infrastructure as a code things?
Sure, that's such a great question. Well, everyone's in the cloud these days in one way or another. You want to run your code on the server, supposedly. But the way it's done in AWS in particular, or other cloud providers in a similar way, you go to a UI, basically a set of web apps. That's what AWS gives you. Click some buttons, and you get some instances running somewhere that run your code. Fundamentally, that's what it boils down to. But let's say something changes, or you want to move your thing to a different region, or you want to have a dev environment or something like that. Suddenly you have to click all these buttons all over again in the exact same sequence as you did. And I mean, you're lucky if you made notes, but most people don't. And so that's how the idea that infrastructure should be described as code came to be. Because it's convenient. You can write something, some config, think of it as JSON, YAML, whatever, and you can describe all of the clusters, instances, CDNs, and things like that, how they interact. You write it once, and then you can replicate it, you can shut it down, you can spin it up, you can move it to a different cloud provider, perhaps, depending on which tool you use. So that's fundamentally what infrastructure as code is about. And it's kind of hard to get started with if you're just exploring. Has a barrier to start, if you will, but then it's inevitable. It's a lifesaver. If you don't have it, you're gonna run in trouble for sure. If you're building an AWS or something like that.
Okay. So basically, we have a piece of code, and we are so when we have to replicate the same thing on a infrastructure, we can run our code, and it will replicate the same on AWS. So
exactly. Let's say the most popular and kind of a de facto standard in this world is Terraform. Language created by HashiCorp and the corresponding tool. So you can say, I want a network, and literally say network. And then you can say, I want a container that runs in an ECS cluster in that network. And then if you're deploying a front-end app, you can say, I want an S3 bucket that will have such and such files. And you can say, I want a CDN, CloudFront cache, basically, that will cache whatever in this bucket. And this is how you get your front-end app deployed, right? Like, you describe this once as a pretty concise piece of code with lots and lots of kind of more low-level specifics. Of course, you describe it once, and you're all set. You can just say Terraform apply, and it will run it. The problem with it, though, that for an average developer, that's not an easy thing to do. DevOps engineers, people who do, who are AWS certified experts, basically in AWS, they know how to write this, but an average developer doesn't. And well, actually, that's kind of the problem that we solve with our product.
Yeah, that's really good. Lars, you have anything?
Yeah, so from my understanding, like, one of the benefits of Digger, your product and your company's product, is it will take care of this behind the scenes, and you can go in and customize it if you really want to know what you're doing. But other than that, you can kind of leave it alone. Maybe you could explain it, or maybe you could show like, how do you get started with Digger, and which technologies do you support? And well, first of all, which cloud provider do you support? I think that's also important.
Sure, I'm happy to show you a demo in a minute. But mainly, we're focusing on AWS. There is no reason for us not to support other cloud providers. So technically, we can. We are a startup, so we just thought there are enough AWS people out there, so that we just focus on one. But Terraform is cloud agnostic. And yes, you're right. This is exactly what we do. Before I launch a demo, I can kind of share some high level details. I'm sure many of our audience are familiar with Vercel. Amazing, great tool to deploy front ends, and you basically connect your repository, gives you a URL. Unfortunately, if you want to use Amazon for whatever reason, you just don't have such experience. You have to dig deep to kind of figure it out how to get a similar thing, even though Vercel uses Amazon under the hood, and it's a fairly simple combination of a CDN and S3 bucket, right? That's it fundamentally, and it's not that hard to replicate Vercel-like setup in your AWS account if you know exactly how to do it. But only specialists in DevOps know that. So a front-end engineer can not possibly do that. And so what Digger does, it literally configures your AWS account to run your code. That's what we do through Terraform.
So things like logging and networking and CDN and IAM and
exactly. It all just works out of the box. Especially security groups, massive pain in the ass. Like login monitoring. You're right. Like just the mere fact of configuring logging and CloudWatch groups and all of that. Like you got to know how to do this before you can get some logging. Why is that? Well, Amazon is a box full of tools, and you just have to know how to put them together. And that's a barrier. That's a really steep learning curve for pretty much every developer out there. So anyway, happy to show. Share my screen?
Who's the perfect user? Who's the perfect user of Digger? Like I have a web app. I have a single page application web app in JavaScript. I have a backend in Python or .NET or Java, Ruby. I use a SQL Server or Postgres, or I have a Redis cache.
Believe it or not, we support all of this because Amazon already done the work for us, right? It supports. Amazon has all the primitives to run pretty much any stack. So Digger supports three main kind of categories of components: backend pieces, which is either containers or Lambda functions. So you can, if you have .NET app or a Node app or a Ruby app, whatever, right? You can just connect your repository, and Digger will make sure the backend works by provisioning a container. Front end, same thing. Most people use either React or Next.js or Vue or Angular, right? What it boils down to is an S3 bucket with a CDN and possibly a few lambdas for server-side rendering. By the way, we support Next.js first class, so you can just again connect your repository, and Digger will make sure it runs. And then finally, databases, resources we call them. Postgres, sure, MySQL, RDS as well. Again, these are things done by Amazon. We're not like reinventing a database engine here. Amazon provides all these building blocks, but it's really hard to put them together. So that's what we help with.
Nice. So if you can spin up a demo, and I believe it's like a platform as a service kind of thing. So you log in on your app, on your website.
Well, yes and no, because let me just share my screen, because the biggest value prop of Digger is actually managing your AWS account. There's no shortage of platform as a services like Heroku, and it's all good. And there are newer ones like Render and things like that. But lots of people actually prefer to use their AWS account, and one of the bigger use cases for it is startups who get free credits, right? So you have lots of free credits. So Amazon is basically free for you, but now you suddenly have to spend time and effort to spin things up. And that's the use case of Digger. Can you see my screen?
Sure. And Deep, you feel free to ask questions while Igor is demoing this, and I will stay silent for a minute.
Right now, I'm just starting a new project on Digger. All you need to do to run Digger, to use Digger, is to select a thing you want to deploy. Literally connect a repository. In this case, I'm connecting a web application, right? A static web app. I already have my GitHub connected because I'm logged in. And so I just click next, and we get to the parsing stage where Digger literally reads your repository, analyzes what it is, tries to figure out what's the best infrastructure for this code. And so if I hit next, you see we've detected a single page app, and that's what the user would be happy with. But let me just, for the sake of a demo, click back, and you see we support Docker containers, single page apps, Lambdas. So there are like more than one way you could run Digger, but we already skipped that. All I need to do is, I don't know, call it front end. I don't know, the default thing. You see the build directory was detected, the build command was detected, the service path was detected from the repo. And these are fairly basic options. You see something similar on Vercel, for example, right? Just click next, and here I'll be entering my AWS keys. Actually, I probably should stop sharing briefly before I do that. Sorry for that little hiccup. Probably just need to copy the keys. I am copying my key. Yep.
So we have to select a repository for the project which we want to deploy on our AWS, right?
Exactly. So okay, I've now connected my keys here. I've added my AWS keys here. I can choose region. So I have my AWS account. Supposed to be blank, nothing there. Did I not share? Oh, okay, it's not sharing. Okay. So okay, I've added my keys, right? So I have an AWS account. I've added my keys, and it's literally the only part where I need to think about AWS when using Digger. I just delegated AWS management to Digger completely, and then I'm checking the keys. You see they're valid, and I hit deploy. And this is it. This is the deployment is going to get started pretty much soon. It's going to take a few minutes, so you have these jobs and things like that. But in the meantime, we can switch to a different project to give you a sense of what Digger is. You have services. You can have multiple environments. You can create new environments, like basically setting up a branch and it will get deployed automatically. You can link custom domains. Again, like you have on platform as a service. You can do routing. You can have these deployment jobs. You can see logs, see how it's built. In this case, a container front end would have a similar output, right? For environment, for example, you can see URLs for your apps. You can redeploy them. So it's basically the full stack platform here that manages your AWS account, but you don't have to interact with Amazon. And that's the kind of the convenience of it. I guess a more advanced feature, if you really want to kind of take advantage of AWS, you can actually configure a separate infrastructure repository using this button. And then remember, I told you in the beginning that Digger actually generates Terraform under the hood. Infrastructure as code. So you can, if you connect your repository here, you can literally get this Terraform in your GitHub. You can modify it, you can customize it if you know what you're doing, or maybe if there is an AWS service that you haven't found a button in Digger to do, you can literally drop your own Terraform and it will just work. Yeah, that's kind of it. That's your alternative UI to AWS, if you will.
So my next question is like, suppose we have infrastructure is ready on AWS, right? So now we want to replicate it using Digger. So is it possible? Like we upload the YML file to Digger, and Digger will take care rest of the things.
Yeah, you can import. I mean, YML files. Not sure which you mean serverless, yeah, YML files, or what kind of YML files?
To create infrastructures like
Oh yeah, I mean, if you already have infrastructure as code
yeah,
defined somewhere, like Terraform,
yeah.
totally, you can. You absolutely can. In fact, let me show you that infrastructure repo. It will be probably easier, like that, for example, right? You have this. If you configure an infrastructure repository, you get a similar configuration to what you see on the screen right now. You have, for every environment, you have a folder.
Mm-hmm.
In every folder, you have some structure generated by Digger. But you can actually even learn Terraform from it if you like. It's pretty simple. It's not like, it's basically JSON. There's no advanced stuff in the language itself. The hard stuff is AWS concepts. But you see there's a Digger generated folder here. But one level above, there you can also have a Digger overrides folder next to it. And so if you add your Terraform at the top level, you can actually have whatever you want. And if you have an existing infrastructure in your AWS account already, you can just drop these files here and it will work. Digger runs your entire stack with your customizations if you made them.
Okay, so if I never saw Terraform before, what would a web app host look like here?
Not sure I understand the question fully.
If I'm a person who never saw or heard about Terraform before, what does that look like? Like, can you point any service out in particular in one of your examples here? Explain.
Oh, okay. So
what's in there.
Basically, you mean which services will get created in AWS, right?
Yeah, just what does the Terraform for that look like?
Well, it's a good question. I don't have a ready-made linked repository there. That will probably take a few minutes. But a web app, let's say it's a Next.js project, right? So the Terraform to describe the Next.js project would, first of all, describe an S3 bucket. Actually, I do have something. I do have something that from slightly similar to that info repo. We have Digger custom folder and shared, and here is just an S3 bucket, right? To give you a sense of how simple Terraform can be, this is a description of an S3 bucket, even with some additional condition on top, right? You literally say resource AWS S3 bucket, custom S3 bucket. That's it. That's like the way to describe an S3 bucket. So for a Next.js app, there will be an S3 bucket like that. Even if you never saw Terraform, this is pretty straightforward. On top of this, there will be a CloudFront entry, a link to that S3 bucket. So that will add, maybe 20 lines or something like that. On top of that, you actually need, you have S3 bucket where the files will be stored, and then you have a CloudFront, but you also need a domain. So there will be a Route 53 entry created based on your linked domains. And in Digger actually provides you a convenient UI to link your domains. So that's another component. And then finally, if you have server-side rendering for Next.js, then you also will have a few Lambda edge functions that will do your SSR. But that depends on the project. If you have SSR enabled in your next project, then Digger will create these functions. If you don't, then we will not create these functions.
So to the people who know about Terraform, an important concept there is the Terraform state. So where does that live?
Great question. Really great question. So Digger manages the Terraform state for you, right? So that's probably the only platform as a service component of Digger that we keep to our servers. We run Terraform for you so that you don't have to deal with the state. There's actually an option to store that in your AWS account as well, just a little easier and faster if we run it on our servers. You can think of this as a CI for Terraform kind of a low-level concept would be very similar. But we give you a UI so that an average developer can actually take advantage of that. You don't need to be like a DevOps expert.
Deep, is something on your mind?
Yeah. So let's say we don't have our project code and we just need to create this infrastructure using Digger. So is it possible just to create infrastructure without having any project?
Technically, yes. But you probably don't need Digger in this case. So it's like if you actually know what you're doing, as in like, okay, I want to create this cluster and that network and all of that, then like the only benefit of Digger for you would be the centralized state. In which case, yeah, sure, you can run Terraform on your laptop and then copy the code to Digger and Digger will run it for you. But then, like, I mean, why not use HashiCorp Cloud for that? That's going to be kind of the same sort of experience for you. The value out of Digger is for people who don't really understand what infrastructure needs to be created in the first place. Like, how do you know the right security groups, the right permissions, keep it up to date when you create new apps and services? Like, that's the angle. If you actually know what you want to create, then probably Digger will only, well, if you're in a big team, then again, Digger is useful because the state is centralized. That's another use case, I guess.
Yep, that's good. So yeah, that is from mine.
I guess one thing that we are really passionate about at Digger is simplicity. And the strange thing is, if you think of it, right, like mobile engineers or front-end engineers, would use pretty much the same tools and libraries for a weekend project as well as for a massive enterprise app, right? It's going to be just bigger, but fundamentally the same. Whereas in infrastructure, you have this split, like tiny little projects would live on Vercel, Heroku, I don't know, Render, things like that. And then anything more serious than that would live in Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud, but that requires like a bunch of specialists to manage it. That fundamentally, that feels very wrong because developers love tools that are usable, understandable. I personally, as a former front-end engineer, I'd like things to make sense that I see on the screen. I don't like reading the manual before clicking the button, before knowing which button to click, and that thing just doesn't exist. So we're trying to bridge that gap.
So you support GitHub repos. I know. Any other Git provider?
We actually do support GitLab as well for a couple of our customers. It's same old flow. There is no like limitation there. GitLab API is just a little slower. So the loading of repos take a bit longer. But yes, we do. We support GitLab and we support GitHub. Planning to add Bitbucket support if some users actually ask for it. So far, no one asked. It seems like a niche provider.
So how are you applying the Terraform? Are you using GitHub Actions in the repo, or are you doing it server side at Digger?
We are actually taking a hybrid approach. We are using code build, which is Amazon CI building block in your AWS account that would run this stuff. So it's like, actually, there are two options. It can run in your AWS account or in ours. So it can be either way. But Digger essentially what does under the hood, what it does, it creates a code build job, which is already well-tested CI tool by generating its configuration. So the user doesn't need to write this lengthy YAML files to deploy their stack. At the same time, all of the benefits of this well-tested Amazon build CI are there.
Okay, so I won't see any GitHub Actions in my own repo when using Digger.
No, but you can. The thing is, like, we're not trying to take over your entire CI pipeline. If you already have some tests, if you already have some, custom build steps, all of that you can keep. We encourage people to use Git flow. So, just connect a branch, just tell Digger, I want this branch to be deployed. When your custom steps has completed in GitHub Actions, then your last action should be merge. I don't know, develop to master, for example, after you've done all your tests, whatever. And then as soon as there is a new commit in master, then Digger picks it up from there and makes sure it is deployed.
Okay. Deep, any more questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, last question. So when user has giving their AWS credentials, so how Digger is managing their security for the
We
AWS
actually
credentials?
are taking it super seriously. We store all of these secrets in AWS parameter store, so it's all like encrypted, secure, and all of that. Then we're actually building this enter keys UI is actually a shortcut. We only use that for like initial initialization. After that, there is an option in AWS to work, directly account to account without even requiring to store the keys. So this is like almost like a one-off procedure to get two accounts connected, and then there is like no ongoing exposure. It's pretty secure. And we are still working on making it even more secure.
So just it is for the initializing the infrastructure as a code, and then the Digger and AWS both are connected with this account. So,
think of it this way: like if you're running a CI job, right? CI provider like Circle CI, it would have secrets, and if you want your code to be deployed to Amazon from Circle CI, then you need to provide Circle CI with your Amazon credentials. Digger does the same thing.
okay, yeah. Thank you. That's
Yeah, so from what I understand now, Digger, you get the developer experience of Vercel or Heroku, but at the cost of running your own AWS infrastructure, and it does sit on AWS infrastructure. But what's the price for Digger then on top of that?
Yes, exactly. Your understanding is correct. So you pay your AWS bill separately, and that actually makes it pretty compelling offering, because Digger actually can optimize your costs. Like you see everything that's running in your AWS account, and you can see what it costs, and you can see you can easily delete things, because Amazon makes it hard almost on purpose. It's really hard to navigate what is out there, and you end up with unwanted bills and things like that. Digger does the other way around. What our pricing model is pretty straightforward. Like again, like with with GitHub or CI providers, you pay a fixed amount per user, and it's not like it increases when you grow your stack. We have a standard tier, $50 per user per month, and that's about it. You have more infrastructure, your AWS bill grows, but not your Digger spending. And Digger actually, we are interested in making it cheaper for you, as opposed to Heroku. You have a free tier, but then a database on Heroku would cost you like $200 a month, whereas the exact same database on Amazon, like literally the exact same instance, would cost you like 20 or 30. It's ridiculous how much they charge on top. With Digger, no such problem. I think just literally running one database on Digger pays for Digger compared to Heroku.
So it's also your services on AWS are managed rather than building your own thing in a virtual machine or something like that, and keeping that up to date and maintained.
We don't recommend people to go EC2 route at all. Like it's 2022. Come on, it's not 2002, right? Like, or 2006 with Amazon was released first, right? More than 10 years ago, maybe it was okay to just deploy things on EC2 instances. Like today, it just isn't worth it. Yes, it's cheaper kind of on a unit basis, but you end up with maintenance, upgrades, all sorts of stuff that you probably don't want to do. And most developers don't know how to do this. So our default thing for containers is EC2 Fargate, pretty high level service. Our default for front ends again is CloudFront linked to an S3 bucket, as high level in the stack as possible. Kubernetes is an option for those who really want to dig into it. Again, it comes at the cost of additional node that you basically an instance you pay for, and then you have to maintain your Kubernetes cluster yourself. So by default, we don't recommend people to use Kubernetes if they're getting started, but we support it.
Nice. Is there anything else you would like to promote before we wrap up, Igor?
Well, Digger is the thing I'd like to promote for sure. Seriously, give it a try. Like, Amazon is associated with complexity. People have grown to believe that, like, oh shit, this is so hard. It doesn't have to be. If you try Digger, it's even easier than Heroku and in many cases Vercel. Much cheaper in your AWS account. If you have free credit, that should be a no-brainer, I think.
Nice. So as you can see here at the bottom of the screen, your website is Digger.dev, and you have a similar Twitter account, and that's where you can learn everything about Digger, right?
Yes, folks, and Digger.dev, go check it out. We have a free tier, so you don't have to pay anything up front. We would actually love to hear from anyone in attendance how it goes. AWS account, you can also create it for free. So just go and check it out.
Nice. Any, just last minute, any big announcements or anything exciting in the roadmap that people should know about?
Well, we are building our even simpler experience compared to what you can see now. That's a new UX coming very soon, and that is going to make it much more. We recently raised a sizable seed round from some top VCs, so that allowed us to hire some of the best engineers out there from top companies, and so we are Digger next generation Digger is coming your way. That's going to be, I mean, I don't want to commit to any timelines, but early summer, most certainly.
Nice. Deep, you want to say goodbye?
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us, and yeah.
Thank you very
Deep.
much
Thanks, Lars.
for coming,
thank
Igor. And
thanks for having me.
This is Tech Talks. We'll be back Friday this week about it's called the Voice of Developers. So come back for that if you're into learning about this. What is it? Do you remember, Deep? It's like
Prisma.
It's a podcast or something, or maybe I'm getting that wrong. Anyways, we'll be back Friday, and you will learn about the Voice of Developers from PayPal. Thank you for coming, Igor. Nice to see you, Deep.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Have a nice week.
Take care. Bye.